Radio Iran. Radio Iran.
همبستگی با ادیان
با دکتر صادق نمازی‌خواه.
Again, thank you, Rabbi Comes Daniel, and I think that I always enjoyed talking to you whenever we get together.
Likewise.
The question that I have right now on the practicing religion or commandment and all of those things, what's the difference between the Reform and Orthodox Judaism?
It's a good question. First of all, I think you need to see Judaism as a very wide spectrum, and to recognize that we all have the same law. We just respond to it differently. So, for instance, the Sabbath, Shabbat. We are told not to do any work on Shabbat. The way the Orthodox determine what the categories of work are, there's 39 official categories of work that were defined, because the Torah itself does not define what work is, but the rabbis did in the Talmud. They looked at the building of the temple in Jerusalem, and they isolated 39 different categories of work, carrying things from a private place to a public place, or carrying things, or walking a long distance, cutting things, exchanging money for, purchasing, and so on and so forth. All of those things are not to be done on Shabbat if you're an Orthodox Jew. As a Reformed Jew in 2020, I have a different idea of what work is sometimes. I'll give you an example. If let's say somebody works in Century City, and they work in an office building where the air gets pumped in and they can't open the windows, and they have piped in music and so on and so forth, and they can't wait to get out maybe and go sailing. So on Shabbat, they could go sailing, but there's so many things that are involved with sailing that would be forbidden from an Orthodox point of view that they would never do it. From a Reform point of view, I think that person could go out and go sailing. On the other hand, let's say that somebody is a professional sailor all week long. He may want to go in the opposite direction and go to Century City and go shopping, which he never has a chance to do during the week. So, I would say that work and rest, I think certainly at this stage in our infrastructure and the reality of our technology, that giving our phones a rest and our computers a rest on Shabbat would be a wonderful thing that we could all do. Obviously not something that was anticipated by the rabbis. But besides that, it involves electricity, which Orthodox Jews will stay away from using on Shabbat. Besides that, that's how we work now. And if we take a break from that, if we pause from that, if we take an internet Shabbat, it would be terrific.
So you didn't have any problem in your synagogue on the Shabbat to have the lights on and everything?
Mm-mm. But of course, if you walked into an Orthodox synagogue, the lights would be on too, except they would be left on from the night before. They wouldn't have been turned off.
So the turning off is a problem, not being off.
Turning off and then turning them back on. Right? You can't initiate a fire on Shabbat, and electricity is considered to be contemporary fire.
So if you talk about the ultra-Orthodox, is that practical to leave it on, to leave the lights on?
They do. I mean, is it practical? I mean, it's not great for the environment. And I think that that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Depending upon where you are, if you have another room in your home, that's dark so you can go to sleep, I think that's a good thing. Otherwise, it will interfere with sleep, and that's not good for your health either. So I think that the Reform attitude is that Shabbat should be a blessing, Shabbat should be enjoyable, and Shabbat shouldn't be a burden, because if it becomes a burden, then you don't want to do it. The initial idea was that Shabbat would be liberating. It would be liberating. It would take you away from your workday week and give you a whole chance to. There's this wonderful phrase in the Torah that we say on Friday night, that when the work of creation was finished, it referring to God, it says Shabbat vayinafash, that God. You can hear the word Shabbat right in that as a verb, that God Shabbat vayinafash, and nefesh is the word for soul, so that the rest is all the way down to your soul. That the soul of the universe was refreshed. That's the kind of day it should be. It should be a day of soul relaxation, so that you can go back into the new week with a good, focused, wonderful attitude that takes the lessons that you learned from that rest right into the week.
So when you talk about all of these differences, is how the Orthodox Jews look at the reforms?
Well, they look at it depends who you're talking to. I think some of them look at us, like puppies when they tilt their head to the side like that, when they're not sure about something. They're really not sure. Some of them don't consider us to be Jewish because they think that we've gone too far. But others we work with in concert and, work with in terms of, healing things in society and so on and so forth. You'll find that Jews of every ilk, feel that we're mandated to take care of things that are going wrong in society. Now, does the Orthodox community have a different take on what those things are than I do? Sometimes, yes. And we have things in common. So, but I've experienced all kinds of Orthodox attitudes towards Reform Judaism.
Where the Kabbalah fits into these two groups?
In between.
In
Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism, which in some ways is as old as Judaism itself, in some ways. In other ways, it's more something out of the Middle Ages, and it is the realm of Jewish mysticism. It is not a religion unto itself, which is sometimes how it's presented.
Like a Sufis in Islam?
Like Sufism in Islam, right? My understanding is that, are Sufis separate from?
No, different. We have two different kind of the Sufis.
Right. So, we have all kinds of mystics, because we're Jewish, so there's not going to be one or two kinds.
The different kind of the Sufis have different philosophies. Some of them are the main line, and some of them are extremely separate group, and some of them are in the middle.
Okay. I think that Kabbalah is similar to that, although I think the problem is when people present it as something completely separate, and it's not. It's grounded in being Jewish. It's grounded in Jewish texts and in Jewish values and so on and so forth. So you're not allowed to study Kabbalah until you're 40 years old and are married and have a child, I think a child of each gender. And then you can study, right? The idea being is that you have to be completely set in your life so that the Kabbalah doesn't take you away. And that it keeps you in this world and working on very worldly things. So I think that it's important to understand it as something that certainly people delve into. The Kabbalah that I've studied, I love. Does that make me a Kabbalist? I don't think so. Does it make me appreciate Kabbalah and some of the insights? Yes. Do I find, for me, that sometimes the Kabbalistic world circles in on itself and, after a while can't think out of a certain parameter? Yeah, and that's difficult for me. That's not who I am in many ways.
Do they have like a leader controlling the group, like a cult? Do you consider a cult?
No, it's not a cult.
Not a cult.
No. There are teachers, there are rabbis and non-rabbis who teach Kabbalah, and they certainly have their followers, right? I don't think that any of them are cult-like in that regard. It's not like some of the cults that were extant in the 80s and 90s, and it's not like Scientology or something like that. It's not insulated in that way.
So change the subject. Let's talk about the philosophy of the kosher. What things kosher apply to?
Okay, well, first I have a story. So, right inside the Damascus Gate in East Jerusalem, there is a pita factory. And you can go to this pita factory with a little bag of vegetables, right? And they will make what they call for you a pizza. And so they will take pita dough, but they'll smash it down, smush it down so that it doesn't rise. And they'll put some oil on it, and they'll put some eggs on it, and they'll put some of those little cheese wedges with aluminum foil on them. They'll put that and some spices, and then they'll put your vegetables on, throw it in this oven that must be 100 million years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then it comes out and it's this marvelous thing, right? So I was watching a Muslim gentleman, Palestinian, making a pizza for somebody, and he broke an egg, and the egg had a blood spot on it, and he immediately threw it away, which is exactly what we would do. So, the similarities between the philosophy of keeping kosher and halal is very, very similar, right? It's pretty much that it is when you slaughter an animal, it's a sad occasion, and we're grateful for it because it keeps us alive, and of course there's spiritual intent, and there are blessings that are said, and then the meat can only be prepared. First of all, the animal has to be slaughtered in a way that hopefully causes it the least amount of pain possible. I'm not as familiar with a halal technique,
Same thing, yeah.
But pretty much cutting the jugular vein so that the blood drains out as quickly as possible. And then going from an earlier citation in the Torah, which says that, in Hebrew, I'm not sure again how this is in Arabic, but in Hebrew, the word for, or even in Farsi, it may be, a Farsi thing as well, because all those languages, kind of layered on each other. The word for blood is dam, the word for human being is adam, and the word for earth is adama. And so they're all linked together. after the story of Noah, or Noach, as he's called in the Torah, after that flood, the idea was that that murder was rampant in the world, and that's why God caused the flood. And so the idea was that we could eat meat at that point, but and hopefully it would assuage us from killing each other. But the blood of the animal had to go back into the ground. So
And where it has to go back where?
into the ground, into the earth.
Yeah.
So the dam goes back into the Adamah, which is its source and where it belongs. That being said, and that's why kosher meat is very dry, because as much of that body fluid from the animal is drained
Same
out.
thing with halal.
Right? So there you go. So now the additions that we have are from a law that says you can't boil a kid in its mother's milk, which was a very common ancient sacrifice, to take milk from the mother, boil it, and take the calf and
Yeah.
And so we don't do that. Specifically, we're not allowed to eat fish that don't have fins and don't have scales.
Same thing in the
Yeah.
Muslim.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, it's
So is that only applies to the eggs and meat, or kosher applies to the other things too?
other things in life. I mean,
Other things
other-
that you use.
other foods that we use. Mostly it applies to the animals that we eat, fish that we eat, the birds that we eat. It does not apply to any kind of vegetables or anything like that. They're all considered to be neutral, parv. And so, that, now, on the other hand, you do need to look carefully if you really do keep strictly kosher, and say, well, if I'm having steak that's kosher and a baked potato with butter on it, I can't do the two at the same time.
So
Because one is
dairy product
the dairy
doesn't go
product
with
and the meat. You can't do together, right?
Goes back to the same philosophy that you cannot cook the cow in the milk.
Right. Although, I mean, to my mind, that law is about much more than that. I mean, I quoted it in a sermon. There's 3 laws I quoted together: that you can't see the calf in its mother's milk, that if you're going to make a sacrifice, which is how people prayed in the ancient world, you can't kill the mother and the calf on the same day. And the third one is that if you want to go get eggs from a nest, you have to chase the mother bird away, which is not an easy thing to do. And I equated that with what's going on down at the border with children being taken from their parents. That this is not, it's not about how you eat or how you make sacrifices. It's about being a kind person. It's about being a person with consciousness and a mindfulness about other human beings and considering them the same as you. And so let's say you eat that way, but you act the other way, then as far as I'm concerned, you're not keeping kosher, right? Because you could have the cleanest kosher kitchen in the world, but if you're also part of the border patrol and taking kids out of their parents' arms, then what's the point? You haven't learned anything from that law.
So when you're talking about the Noah's flood, because people were killing each other, I think that in this case, if God forbid we have something like Noah's flood, is atomic bombs.
Right.
Fortunately, we are going to that direction, because all of these atomic bombs that being built, and if they don't want to use it, why they're building it?
Well, I'm old enough to remember growing up in the midst of the nuclear arms race. And during that time, there was something called MAD, mutually assured destruction, between the United States and the Soviet Union. That they had so many weapons that they could destroy the world several times over, and so did we. And so mutually assured destruction was supposedly keeping us safe. which to my mind meant that there was a nuclear device around my son's neck, and there was a nuclear device around the neck of some child in what was then the Soviet Union. And I had the button for the child in the Soviet Union, and the Russian father had the button for mine, right? And that was supposed to make me feel good and safe and calm. Every time I think about it, it makes me more and more anxious. So, no, I think, the way to really solve the nuclear proliferation issue is for us to disassemble these weapons.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Combs Daniel. That was very kind of you to come all the way from Santa Monica to here to join me in this program, and I appreciate that. I'm sure that we will have a lot to do together in the interfaith.
I look forward to it.
Services, and it's an honor and pleasure to call you a friend, and I hope that I have the same situation with you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that. خیلی ممنون. انشالله در ماه دیگه اولین دوشنبه در خدمت شما هستیم.